Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, founder of Optage, marketing professor, and the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm super excited to introduce Shaina Keren today. Shaina and I have been friends and colleagues and have done a lot of work together. Shaina is a career consultant at SK Career Consulting. She's a career coach who helps people figure out what kind of work they will enjoy and succeed at and how to make that a reality. She's a master at helping people discover their natural talents and create successful careers doing what they do best. On top of this, she's contributed to numerous publications and podcasts and has produced a book, Business Bites, 10 Experts Break It Down. Today, we're going to talk about career building and creating a personal, professional brand, and of course, mentorship. Shaina, how are you?
Amazing. So exciting to be here.
Yeah, me too. You, like I said before, usually you're the one who's interviewing me, so it's nice to be able to turn the tables today.
Yeah. Thank you.
Where did you go to school and what did you study?
That's a story in of itself because it's not what most people expect, but I don't know that there's a straightforward path to doing what I do. I don't think anybody who's 18 wakes up and says, I think I'm going to go help other people choose their careers because I just can't figure it out. And so I went the very straightforward path to getting a degree in education. Growing up, I just thought that I would be a teacher. There were, plenty of teachers who I had over the years who I felt like were role models. So I think I wanted to emulate. I'm always the kind of person who wants to connect to other people, wants to give, teach, share. And that hasn't changed, but the venue has changed, the pathway for that. And so, and I was also looking, I think a big consideration of mine when I was, finishing up high school and making that decision was something that would be family friendly. I knew that, a big goal of mine was to raise a family. And as much as a career was important to me, I wanted to make sure that I would be able to, do both at the same time. And I watched so many people growing up, sort of my parents' generation, the women who, had their degrees and then stopped working to raise a family. And then, by the time I was that age, they were all in their 40s. 50s and struggling with getting back to work. And I knew I didn't want that to happen to me. So I wanted something that I could work my way through and, balance that. So I thought that education was the answer because of the schedule and, raising kids and all that. So I got a degree through Mercy College in a master's in education and started working as a CIT. I was living in the New York City area. So working in preschools, one-on-one with kids. It was exciting for the first few months, maybe. I think when I got new cases and there were some challenges, I was given children with selective mutism at the beginning. For some reason, I had a number of cases. So that was an exciting challenge until I figured it out. And then it took about 2 weeks to hack, the next child. Or hack is not a good word for a child, but, just to figure out how to get to them, how to, what was really going on, the underlying issues. And I, within a year was really bored out of school. And it was scary because I had college loans to pay back and I was the primary breadwinner. For my household, I got married pretty young. So, my income was what we were relying on. And it took me a long time to admit to myself and to the people around me that I really wasn't happy and I was bored. And so I spent a long time reading because that's what I do. If I have a question, I look for a book that has the answer. And spent a lot of time trying to figure out, is it the job? Is it me? Is there something that I can do differently? Maybe there's a specialty that I can learn. I went for courses in reading. I thought maybe I'd become a reading specialist and went through a number of iterations. I went through a point where I thought, maybe it's the one-on-one. I was in classrooms. Then I thought maybe I need to have my own business. So I opened a daycare, because at that point I had my third child and I was looking for something where I could combine, what I was doing. And eventually, about 10 years later, throughout a couple of jobs and trying out different things within this field of education, because I felt like, well, I was still paying off my college debt the entire time. So it was really hard to look back and just say, this was a mistake. This isn't, and I don't know that it was a mistake for the time. I think with the information, the limited information I had at the time, it was a really good decision, but it wasn't working for me a decade later. Let's put it that way. And so at that point, I really dug into careers and testing and how this thing works. And finally, there was one book that had the answer for me. And I read this book called The Pathfinder that I found on Amazon. And at some point through the book, I said, okay, I need to speak to the person who wrote this book. Like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this person to train me, because I want to be able to do, what for other people, what this book itself was able to do for me. And I actually did. And Nicholas Lord, the author of The Pathfinder, became one of my greatest mentors. And that's how I got into the field of career coaching.
It's crazy. And it's so cool because your path, because of the way it went, like you invest so much into an area. And then, it took you a really long time to figure out that it's not for you. But I mean, I think that makes you so much more relatable to the people that you actually help day to day.
Yeah. I speak to so many teachers, therapists of all kinds, whether they're in psychology or, speech therapist is a big one that I think was popular, to get a degree in 10, 15 years ago. And I get to speak to so many of those people. And I think one of the reasons they're attracted to working with me is because, like, I'm not going to look at them like they're an idiot, like they made a mistake. Like, you did a really smart move at the time and it's really not working for you, and that's okay. And you don't need to continue. And I think that's a message that resonates with people. And then I'm able, through my personal experience, to really dig into helping them see, like, there's so many other aspects to you. There's so many other parts of your personality that you have naturally that you don't need to worry that you haven't spent the last decade or two honing, but you have some natural skills, or some transferable skills that you can, without so much effort, put into another industry, and you don't really have to stay stuck.
So talking about transferable skills, how would you compare working in a daycare setting versus like professional and adults that you're working right now? Like, how did that transfer over?
It's really not so different. I mean, I found myself giving a toddler analogy on the training yesterday, and it was to a team. Sometimes I come to businesses and I work with individuals. More of the time, it's for testing, for hiring, or for how do we use this person the right thing. But I happened to be part of a meeting where I was just leading like some next steps for a group of salespeople. There were some new trainees there, and they were just saying how, like, when they get a no, they message someone on LinkedIn, and they get a no, they take it as a no. And I was like, have you ever tried feeding a new food to a toddler? Do you know how many times you have to try until they're comfortable? It doesn't mean they don't like bananas because they spit it out. It means it's a new taste for them, and you need to keep trying. And so, I mean, I find like a lot of similarities. And I think parenting, business, to me, it's all about understanding people, I mean, the best negotiator is like a 10-year-old, right? Can I say, 10 more minutes? Can I keep reading? So I think that, like, a lot of business skills, if you're focusing on the psychology behind it, it's very similar.
So talk about mentorship. Let's get into that. So Shaina, how would you define a mentor?
I actually found myself looking up an article that I recently wrote in the Mishpacha magazine about mentorship to see what I had to say on it. I thought it was interesting. I still agree with my point there, I believe, which was, I wrote that there are three kinds of mentors. There's the kind that you'll never meet. Like, you might listen to people and, podcasts, read their books, either because they aren't alive anymore, or because they're just way too far, out of reach. They're not the kind of person that you can just get a meeting with, and then there are the ones who you can pay to meet, sort of like experts, like a therapist or, some sort of expert professionally. And then there are the ones who are sort of, right at the top, like not out of reach, but if you, do the right things, you'll be able to get there. And so to me, a mentor isn't somebody who you want to emulate everything about them. I think that's what a lot of people look at a mentor and then they get upset when their mentor, say, gets divorced or, does something like that. They're just like, I can't believe it. My whole life. And to me, like, I think I have the same approach when I come to work. I am trained to look at each person and see their best qualities. Anyone who I'm sitting with as a client, that's my focus. And it's funny because I think I'm I don't consider myself not a judgmental person, but I think that you can take that judgmental lens and use it for the positive or for the negative. And so when I'm, meeting someone, I'm going to my focus is automatically on what's amazing about this person and how could they use that. And so I think I look at mentors the same way. It's what does this person know in a certain area that I can learn from, I can emulate, benefit from. And to me, it's, an opportunity to learn from someone who's done something that, you think is incredible.
It's amazing you bring that example of people looking at mentors like they're perfect, and then that thing happens to that mentor, like they get divorced, and it just changes the world. Like, why did I ever look up at this person? Can I still look up? Like, I'm thinking myself, I can think of, two or three people where I've had that feeling, like they were the world to me, and then you see like something happen in the relationship, and I was like, ooh, should I even be looking at them? And I think it's important, like, to separate, right? People have good, people have bad. No one's perfect, and it's okay to look at different people and learn and look up to different aspects, because no one's perfect, especially ourselves.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, if anyone would take any of our lives and, dissect them, from every which area, there would be something that we don't want them to emulate. But that doesn't take away from all the wonderful parts. And I think that people just want like a black and white, good guy, bad guy. This is an amazing person, they're on a pedestal. And then, like, no, everyone who's human is human. And I think that it's okay and to look at each person for what there is to learn from. And I think it's very rare the person who can be a personal role model, a spiritual role model, someone who you can follow in every area. I think that's one in many billion. Yeah, and I think we do ourselves a disservice if we can just take what we can from, different pieces and shop around. And it's the same thing I find bringing up books again. When you read a book, you can't just take every book and just say, okay, this author is amazing. Everything that they say is incredible and I should listen to it. I think it's really important to look at, content the same way we look at people, with a little bit of a critical eye. And, do I agree with that? What do I think of that? And take it in the way that works for you.
Who have been some of your most influential mentors? I know you've mentioned Nicholas Lohr, you've mentioned Jacob Engel in the past. Let's talk about them.
You know me pretty well. Yeah, those are the big ones for me. It's Nick, who I mentioned from the book, who, I read the book. And as I read the book, I felt like he was talking to me. And I think it's, not often that you read something from an author, sort of like going to a lecture and everybody in the audience has that feeling. But it takes someone who really understands human nature, human characteristics, human challenge, to really get in there and, just with a dose of humor that you can just laugh at yourself and our, human frailty and stupidity sometimes. I really connected with him. And then the best part was that he was actually even better in real life, when I got to connect with him, and he became a mentor through, I initially was through pay, I hired him to train me and I took his career coach, certification. And, to me, that was the most worthwhile opportunity. Content was amazing, but getting to connect with someone who did this for the last 40 years, who's been through every scenario, who can answer questions, that you could never find in a book. Like, to me, that was incredible. And we still have a really close relationship. I'll call him up when I get stumped, and he's in his 80s now, but he's still the expert to me. And, he says like, oh, I'm not up to date. I don't know what's going on. And to me, like, you can never be not up to date with human nature. And, the job titles can change, the technology can change, but knowing people, figuring out what the right questions to ask them, how to get into, their core, what makes them tick, what makes them amazing. That's something that doesn't go away. And so, I really, that's someone who I've gained tremendous amount in just understanding, careers and people and how they can go together optimally.
And what about Jacob Engel?
I had met him between my careers in education and career coaching. There was a short period where I saw an ad in a paper, and somebody was looking for like a commission only sales. It was like mobile marketing. It was like when phones just came out and there was like, you can send people text messages. And so, I went and spoke to him and he said, do you want to come to this training that I'm going to, so it was Jacob Engel running this sales training. And he was teaching the principles from you can't teach a kid to ride a bike at a seminar. And I loved it. And I think I stayed and spoke to him a little bit after. And it just, to me, just made so much sense. It was like the first time where I connected like everything that I learned about people with business. I had never seen that before. And so then, that I completely forgot about that episode. But then when I started career coaching, the only social media I'd ever been on, because I once had it for a job, was LinkedIn. And so I'm completely not a social media person, but I figured, well, let me just update my profile there and see if there's anyone there. And then Jacob Engel, who I knew from this training, messaged me, hey, I see what you're doing. So I messaged back, and it was like probably the first message I got on LinkedIn from a real person who I knew. And this is so cool. And like, we're doing business connections. I told him a little bit about what I did. And he said, I'd love to hear more. He gets calls all the time, although he doesn't do consulting, he does business coaching. And so he's somehow become a resource in the community when people get stuck career-wise. He's an address that they go to. And so he said, why don't you come down for a coffee chat? And I did. And I remember giving this I guess it was like my first pitch, but I didn't realize I was giving a pitch, but I sort of brought like a bunch of materials and sat there and explained to him. And I honestly, I didn't think he would take it seriously because he's such an expert on people and he's been doing trainings for so many years. And I remember just like finishing and being out of breath, like this whole thing and why this testing is amazing and, the whole aptitude testing and how it works. And his response like really made such a difference. I don't remember what he said, but it was just like, he was really impressed. And he was like, wow, this is incredible. There's a need for that. Nobody's doing this. Like, yeah, I'm in full support. And then he started sending me people. And it was just like, oh, wow, you can say you believe in it and you agree with it. You can make me feel good. But then he really trusted me, people he knew, business context. I think those were my first referrals. And then, that continued in terms of personal mentoring. I met with him a number of times over the years, when I'm working through, a challenge, and he's amazing. He's trained by Stephen Covey of the Stephen Covey Institute. So in the 7 Habits. So I've trained in that with him, and that really shaped my views and how I approach business and how everything has to be a win-win. And just all of those principles, I think, laid foundations for me that are things that I don't think I would have been exposed to otherwise. And so that's been extremely helpful to me over the years. And, just having someone who's been there, who is an expensive coach, who's willing to give me the time to just show me what I can do, introduce me to my first business client, fully encourage me, help me figure out, when I was like, well, how do I charge them? What do I, how do I do it? And just laying down step by step and just like no question, of course you can do this. And then, going in and being able to do things that I didn't expect I'd be able to do has been extremely, life-changing and meaningful in establishing my career.
I think it's fascinating. I think like the unspoken words of what you just told me is that it's amazing how motivated you were to get up, to meet people and, not necessarily, trained in this area of career coaching, but you really, pushed yourself to move forward and created this amazing opportunity to speak with different people, to meet with different people, not be scared to go for a coffee and to talk. And it's amazing that through that initiative, that started this amazing career that you can now help so many others. And I think people are scared often to like go out there and to have that meeting and to talk. But you can see that when you do actually put your mind to it and, create that opportunity, things can come your way.
Absolutely. I mean, I met with so many people and that part wasn't hard for me. It was like scary because like they might think I'm an idiot and what do you think you're doing? But, and, even Nick, who I consider more, less of a business mentor and more of the career coaching mentor. And to me, I've separated that. You're really good at this. I'm going to learn that from you. You're really good at this. I'm going to take that from you. He told me on one of our initial phone calls, like, if you think that you could do this full time and make a living from it, like, don't even bother, And I chose to, file that away in a less important file and, keep it in mind, but not let it make a decision for me. And I think I was just like so passionate and I get like this about things that I believe in. About like spreading this with the world that I just can't help myself. Like anybody who wants to listen, I will talk about this.
Well, I'm glad you didn't listen to him on that one because that would have been a real pity. It's also interesting that you mentioned before that like social media is so not your thing because if anyone knows Shaina, she is really amazing on LinkedIn. Her posts are very thoughtful. I would say she's definitely a bit of an influencer. Moving into you mentoring others. So obviously you're mentoring others through social media without even potentially meeting those people, but also you're mentoring your clients, also new coaches that are working for you. So what are your keys to mentoring success?
It's fascinating to me how I think teaching has happened for me, like in this way, with individuals. And like you said, the people, I think the people who I feel best about helping are the people who I never met. Like when I get a random message or I've met people at social events and they'll say like, oh, my husband went in and asked for a raise because he's been reading your posts for a while and he would have never had the courage to do it otherwise. And I'm like, that's amazing because I hope and I assume that for every person who tells me, there are 10 people who didn't tell me. And so I'm able to impact, a lot more. And that's what I think is incredible about social media. The people who I know is very limited, but the people who can read what I share out there is unlimited. So that's amazing. To me, to answer your question, mentoring, I think it's a real struggle between being able to show someone what they are capable of. And then, I tend to shoot all the way, as like in the Myers-Briggs, like the intuitive, personality who's just like, total sixth sense and futuristic and vision and imagining what could be. So any conversation I have with someone, I work on, I think it's helpful where I can see the possibilities for them and paint that picture for them. But then I always need to reel it back and take it to, okay, but now what should I do today? Like, what's my next step? And I try very hard to be theoretical in the beginning so that they can expand their minds, because people's minds hold them in so much because the buts of, but this or but that, right? Just stop them, well, that doesn't make sense because I can't afford it. So then they don't let themselves imagine. And then, so like one of the biggest gifts the person could give themselves is if forget about reality just for a minute, imagine possibilities. And if you could become a doctor, then how would your life look different? What would you be happy? What would give you that feeling of satisfaction? Okay, now you're not going to become a doctor, right? But what are the pieces that we can pull out of that are practical? And then what can you go do tomorrow? And I like to see people, not doing theory in careers, but practical, getting a new job, switching up what they do, gaining a new skill. And so to me, mentoring is showing someone what they're capable of, but then showing them, where to place their foot next and sort of steps, and then reminding them that all they need to know is one, maybe two, maybe three steps ahead. But then you will never know exactly what's going to happen. If anyone would have asked, me or any of the other amazing people who you've had on the, on the podcast, if they could have predicted the theme that I seem to hear when I'm listening, to other people on your podcast is like, none of their careers were really predictable. It's sort of, you have to take the next right step and then do that, and then the other thing that I think is a big deal is people, for some reason, harp so much on what they're bad at, right? Like, why do we spend so much time thinking about it? And I guess, I read this recently about school. So if you're bad at math, right, like I was and many are, then the only subject that you're going to really invest in, tutoring and extra time out of school and all that extra attention, is on the subject that you're bad at, right? Now, maybe that makes sense for school, but we shouldn't apply that after school, right? Like, I'm bad at math, and so I use a calculator, I use a bookkeeper, I use an accountant. I don't do any of the things that I'm bad at, and I focus on maybe it's just a couple of things that I'm good at. But if I focus on my career building around those things exclusively, that's where you find success. And so I think that people need to do that when they're finished with schooling. Focus on the things that they're naturally good at, and the things that you're bad at, you will only be able to make incrementally better. You'll never be incredible. So focus on the things that are your natural gifts, and then you could be the best.
Wow, it makes me think of so many things, but like, especially with children, and I think I've heard that concept before. It's like, why do we spend all the money on the tutoring? Like, let's find those things that they're really good at and spend all the money on taking those talents and making it flourish. I think people in general try to find excuses because it's hard, right? To change, to work a little bit. It's much easier to find the reason out of like, oh, I can't do this. So it's great that there are people like you who can help, be sort of a cheerleader and find those special traits that people have that can make them successful, and say, hey guys, like, forget about all this bad, but you need to focus on the good, and you can really do a lot with it.
Yeah. And I think the reason to do that in childhood is because, the kid who's good at, reading and who just gets a chance to read will really not develop as a well-rounded person if we let them neglect all the other parts. But once you've got the foundational, you can make a calculation, you could bake a cake, you can do the things that you need to do. Like, after that, it might not be as useful anymore.
Let's move over to your area of expertise, which some people would say it's career coaching, but I'm going to say it's building a personal brand and helping people do that. Shaina, you clearly have a knack for educating others. Did you always know this about yourself?
I think if you ask my younger siblings, they'll say yes. So I think I was always a bit, I don't know if the word is bossy, but as a kid, but I sort of, always, I think, like study things and figure out what I think is the best way of doing it, and then going ahead and doing it and maybe getting frustrated if other people don't do it that way. So that might also be a weakness, but I tried to turn it into a strength at this point in my life. So I think the answer to that is yes. I thought as a teen, I worked in camps, with kids who are exploring Judaism, and I was always in a teaching role. So that's nothing new to me. I just am doing it in a completely different way than I expected.
Is there one quick exercise people can use to start their journey to figure out their strengths and affinities?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so easy and everybody should do it and you can do it for free. So please do. Just the basics, the personality type, the Myers-Briggs, I'm a big fan of it. A lot of the complaints against it or hesitations to it are, I think, when people don't understand that it's not supposed to be the whole life solution. It's just a little bit of useful information that could be really helpful. And seeing people discover like that they're a true introvert or a true extrovert, I think is like so helpful to people that you're looking for four basic pieces of information about yourself, right? The introversion, the extroversion, the are you more down to earth or more futuristic, more emotional, more logical, more planned, more organized. And it's amazing to hear the comments that people have in sessions when we figure this out, like, oh, that's why my wife is like this and that's why my mom is like that, and no wonder. Okay, well, if we just once you understand that, you understand human nature, I think is the secret to being successful anywhere. And so there's a free test. I have a free quiz on my website, ShainaKeren.com, where you can watch a video and answer 4 questions about yourself, and then you'll get the description. You can go on personality.com if you prefer like a longer multiple choice, 16personalities.com, look for a longer multiple choice questionnaire. And then on the us.labor.gov, I believe it is, there are 2 tests. Like there's the Holland code, and there's another one. You sound like, looks like you're familiar with it. And just some, like there are plenty of free career tests that might not be the full answer. And I find that because they're online multiple choice tests, so it's sort of whatever you put in, you'll get out. So, depending on your mood or your stage of life, you might get different responses. But that's a really good start. Start with finding out, are you more investigative? Are you more, psychology? Are you more business focused? The point where I think it's like you want to, you've maxed out of what that can offer you is when they start making career suggestions, because those algorithms are limited by what you put in. And the career choices, I don't think are necessarily like updated on a fast basis as new jobs are created. But I like to use it to the same way I use mentors. Like, to give you some information so then you can take it yourself and figure out, okay, it says engineer would be a good thing for me. I wonder why. Well, that's because I'm interested in mechanics, interested in nature. Well, how could I apply that? Do I want to apply that? Like, I think it gets a little bit more complicated at a certain point where you want to make your own decisions, just because there's a recommendation, does that fit for my lifestyle? And that's why I work with people like doing aptitude testing, which gets more specific, and we don't just rely on data. We also get to know the whole person. But definitely like starting with figuring out your personality type, your Holland code, all of those free resources. The Strengths Finder, I think, is an incredible resource also. So all of those things are gifts that people should give themselves. Maybe it's going to cost you $20. I think, better than therapy, at least for a start.
I think it's a good point about like some of these tests pigeonholing people and saying, yeah, you're going to be a engineer, or you should be a doctor. I think that could be dangerous, but I love how when you have an advisor, a mentor, a coach who can help you like break that down and see like what are those traits, and those things could apply to many different jobs. I love that because I remember taking my personality test when I was doing my MBA, and it told me that I should go either into marketing or HR, which I think was pretty accurate. But like to me, it was like, is HR really for me? And like I really struggled with like, but what if I want to go into finance? And so it's kind of it brings back.
I think it's like, wait, we didn't ask you. Like you can give us information. Don't start making decisions for us on a computer. Like I think maybe AI can do it now, but I think with these tests, like people need to take them with a grain of salt, but use the information. The information on its own is valuable. You just need to figure out how to incorporate it into your life. So yeah, I got like a farmer and a nursing home administrator as mine. Like I can hear that because I love nature. I don't love animals, but like I can hear the management piece or the outdoorsy piece. But then again, it's like not taking so many other factors into account. And to me, the biggest thing is like I think humans need to be they're the experts on themselves, and I think they need to be given the information and then be trusted to make the right decision.
So once someone figures out the general direction they want to take their career in, what would you recommend they do to first start building their professional brand?
Like you say in your podcast, it's all about mentorship. It's your network is your net worth is true. I think that, I would have never gotten to where I am without the people, many people who I've connected with and who opened up, opportunities and doors along the way. And it's really about the relationship. So I think LinkedIn is a great place to do that. If you know people, sometimes I have to give, I give people the scripts of what to say. Even if you have a neighbor, you say you want to be a nurse and you have a neighbor who's a nurse, but like, that's so awkward. Like I'm the kid next door. Like I don't talk to Mrs. whatever, but then giving them the script of, calling people or texting someone, emailing, you want to get formal, depending on your age and stage, but telling them exactly what to say. And then they're like, oh, okay, that's easy. But it feels like such an awkward thing. And so I like to give people, you can just go ahead and say, hi, I'm exploring. And people also are afraid, I'm cutting myself off there, that once they ask someone, they're sort of like, then it's embarrassing if they don't go into it. And like, there's so many emotions there. So I like to say, even if you've made a decision, just to tell people, I'm exploring this career. It was recommended to me. And I'm speaking to a couple of people to learn more about what it's like. I'm wondering if you could answer a couple of questions for me. And I don't think anybody, gives a no.
Yeah. And I love the fact that you're giving people the scripts, because I'm like looking at myself now. I feel like sometimes I give people advice, hey, just do this and that. But you don't, in your mind, it's really easy to accomplish that thing. But to them, it's like, okay, but how do I actually do it? How do I get out of myself? And the fact that you're giving people those scripts and that kind of path of how to do it and what to expect, it just makes it a heck of a lot easier for them.
And that's something that I learned from a mentor of mine who I've never met, Ramit Sethi. So he does this in his emails. And I used to think it was ridiculous. Like, come on, people don't know how to talk on the phone. And then he put together a script that I found useful. And I was like, he gave a script, I believe it was years ago in an email where he was talking about how to introduce two people to each other, and how to, sort of what, like the psychology behind, well, if you compliment each of them to each other, then you're raising their perceived value, your perceived value, like it's doing good all around. And he had a script for that. And then I realized like, oh, okay, I wouldn't have thought of doing that, making the introduction that way. And I've tried it a couple of times with amazing results. And then I just realized, well, yeah, if you, to some people expressing themselves, in reading or writing, speaking comes naturally. And to other people, they have the feeling, but they would never have figured out the words to that. And so it's so easy to give someone a script, how to get a raise, how to tell someone that you're leaving a job, how to tell someone that you're uncomfortable with some of your responsibilities. And people are so afraid of having these conversations. And so, yeah, I think that following scripts is really helpful.
So I'm going to do a little sidebar. If you haven't noticed, Shaina's very pro people asking for raises. So I always wonder that when Shaina posts about like, hey, you should, her content about asking for a raise, like how many people out there in the, interwebs like freak out like, oh my gosh, like how many people are going to come and ask for a raise today? I always like imagine like how you like rock the world out there. Kind of funny.
But what's happened? I got one of my favorite responses to a post about people should ask for a raise was from an employer who said, and I was scared because of course they were like, why are you making me crazy? And everybody's asking me for money. But I'm very specific in when I tell people to ask for money, only when they truly deserve it. I'm being underpaid, which this example will demonstrate. So he says to me, I have an employee who is incredible. She's been with us the last 7 years. She's never once asked for a raise. I know that if she would go next door tomorrow, she would get $20,000 more. But I just figure, why should I bother offering it? But after I saw your post, I realized that I was not being so nice. And I went over to the woman and I told her that she deserved a $20,000 salary increase. And so thank you. So like, and I'm just like, wow, this woman will never know, we'll never meet. And I'm so happy that I made her life better in that way. But it's honestly, I've had people call me up and say, I want a raise. And I tell them, after getting information, you don't deserve a raise. You're going to have to do something more or switch companies sometime. But when I speak to the employees and the employers, they both usually agree. So it's just a bit of a problem. I think that women just don't speak up a lot. They're really uncomfortable to have these conversations. And so I don't blame the bosses. They're doing their job, keeping money in their pocket, and that's fine. But it's as soon as you come and ask. So, I don't think that the bosses are, employers are doing anything wrong, but I also think that they're actually really happy if somebody comes and is able to demonstrate their value and provide more value. It's always a win-win.
So are there any common missteps to personal branding that you see?
Well, let's start with the resume. The resume, and that could be followed by like LinkedIn profiles, which shouldn't be another version of your resume. But I think that it's so strange to me how many people think that the resume is supposed to be a full-on history of every burger you've ever served in your life. right? Like we don't care, and it's not relevant, it's not useful. And I think the one thing that, I'm curious what you'll hear, what you would say from a marketing perspective, but I always tell people your resume is an advertisement, right? And the advertisement doesn't include everything the company does. It includes only the thing that we think that the person might buy, wants to hear, and you are the thing available for purchase now. And so what do you want to tell them about yourself? And if it doesn't fit into that, then it has too much information.
Yeah, when I was in grad school 12 years ago, they were so picky about making a resume one page. And it was so hard because it's like, oh, I've got this and this and this. But it's exactly like you said, it is an advertisement. And also, just like we've got personas and target markets, really, you need to edit your resume each time you send it out because you have to target it exactly to that position that you're looking for. So for some people, that's hard and it's a lot of work and it's annoying. But honestly, if you do that, it just raises that resume to the top of the pack. Like I remember looking at a resume and someone got a Google certification, that's not the be all and end all, but it automatically, grabbed my eye. It's like, okay, we're going to look at this person because I see that there's already some sort of desire there to get into digital marketing. So you have to look at that at every point of the resume and tailor it specifically to the target market. And that's why like the intro, all those different points, you have to tailor it to the position that you're looking for.
Yeah, it's like getting dressed for an occasion. Like you don't have the same outfit for weddings and funerals, right? Like hopefully, right? But every time, every employer you present, every job you approach, it's a different occasion. There's something different going on. You want to be showing up with a different part of yourself. You're not lying. You're sharing the relevant details without oversharing all the unnecessary information. And it's not very hard with using AI. I've been using it. I think I did a post on LinkedIn. You answered me and then, said we should have a discussion about it. But I've been using it in the meantime, and I'd love to hear what you have to add about this. But I just tell people, drop your resume, the content of your resume into ChatGPT and say, make it fit this job description, drop in the job description, and bingo, it takes about a minute. And it makes the necessary changes for you. So I'm curious if you have any additions that you would recommend for using it for job-related purposes.
Ooh, I've done the same thing for I'll say a family member. I don't want to reveal who it is, but yeah, he had a resume and I said, hey, you really have to beef up like this area and show how it's connected. And yeah, I dropped it into ChatGPT and it was very, very helpful to do it. Like, so he was scared a little bit like, ooh, but the filters are going to pick up that it's, and I think that for a resume, I really don't think that that's an issue. Obviously you need to be honest and truthful, but I think one of the beautiful things about AI is not so much of like asking it a question and letting it pull out from thin air, but it's about, the example that I give is, the painting of Mona Lisa and you cut out the middle of it and then AI was able to figure out and fill in that hole, which is pretty cool. Google Analytics now is doing the same thing where, certain data points we're not going to be able to track. So we're only going to get 80% of the picture, but they're able to use the signals to figure out the rest. And it's the same thing. Like sometimes it's hard for us. We have this picture, or we have this resume, we have this website, and we know that it's missing certain parts, but it's a little bit hard to know how to fill it in. And AI can help us do that. And I think it's a wonderful, use case of how AI can be extremely helpful. And like you said, like if you're going to apply to 10 different jobs, it takes some time to go in and tailor that. But if you can use AI to bring down the amount of time it's going to take and just increase the value of what you're offering to people, I mean, it's a no-brainer. You've discussed before about changing your own career, midlife. How do you respond to someone who has little work experience in their desired field, but is past the age where traditional education is practical? And similarly, how do they get the knowledge and training they need to get their foot in the door?
When people pick up the phone on a call and they start with, I don't want to go to college. Are you still able to help me? And I'm just like, hold on, back up a minute. Like, why don't we first look at you and figure out what you're good at and what you're interested in, and work it the other way around and then see where you want to go and then see what the path is. If there's a certificate path there, if there's a college path there. And I do work with a lot of people who already have families that they're responsible for, supporting, and they don't just have the luxury of going back to school. Sometimes it's doable. And I find that when we break it down to, okay, well, here's going to be your options. And I think I'm good at just laying it down for people in black and white. Well, you can do this and then your life will look like that, or you can do that and then your life will look like this. And then they go home and think about it for a week and then they realize, well, maybe I could figure it out. right? If school is the only way to get there and that's a lifelong dream, I'm big into, well, when you're 65 or whatever age, you'll be looking back. Will you be comfortable with this decision, right? Thinking about it that way. Nowadays, I think, more recently in the last five years, there are way more certificates that you can take. I mean, your ODO Academy is a perfect example of, before that was around, I think people had to go to college for a degree to become a digital marketer. And now in 15 weeks, they can go and do it. And I've seen people go through your course successfully. And so I think there are way more opportunities than there used to be for certificate programs. But I think that's also the wrong question that people are asking, do I need to go to college? It's like, well, if you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, you do need to go to college. Then there's the gray area, the marketing and software and, a whole bunch of other areas where, some people find a college degree is better, and other people will say that they actually prefer to have a degree in psychology or a related subject, and then add certificates and internships and experience. And so I think there's, it's more about starting with yourself than starting with what the outside world says and figuring out what's going to work for your particular career trajectory.
Are there any pessimistic habits you're trying to coach out of people? For example, like in my generation, we were taught, or Mark, in our generation, we're taught to clean your plate, right? When you're eating, make sure you clean your plate. But we know that that's not necessarily the healthiest approach to nutrition. Are there different traits like that you're trying to get people to unlearn?
Oh, yeah. The first one that comes to mind is people thinking that they must stay at a job like for 20 years. And it's definitely the older people, and the younger people are like, do you think 6 months is enough to put on my resume before I move on? So I think with the older generation, it's really scary when they've maxed out of a place to recognize. And sometimes I'm the one who has to just say, like, you can stay here, but you've hit your max and there's nothing else you can do. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you or there's anything wrong with the place you're working for. You simply maxed out of each other. The relationship, is getting stale and it's time to move on. That's a big one that I have to, I think it's hard. And, sometimes people just have to spend an extra few months or years until they recognize it on their own. But yeah, if I could give one message, it's like, it's okay to max out of a work relationship.
On the other hand, I know with my agency, I'm trying my best to make my people life, to be with me for life. So, no,
well,
but obviously,
if the owner is growing as fast as you can grow your career, you can stay forever. But
exactly.
Not every business is as, growth oriented as yours is, I would say.
And it's being in touch with what people want and, what are they looking to do and accomplish. So you have to be, instead of just preaching your own, plan, you have to hear everyone else's plans and see if you can mesh those two together. And then I think you can do a good job of retaining people for the long haul.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious to see because I think the people who are in their 40s who are business owners nowadays are right in between where they understand the sort of the benefits of, the senior generation of, sticking with something and the seriousness, but then also, like I've heard you say, I know that you accommodate, family leave and, just different workplace needs and just, individual, I think you had an example on a podcast about, someone wanting to go to therapy and accommodating, those are normal needs nowadays. I'm curious, if I hope we're going to be able to keep it up, as we go on. And that's the benefit of the younger generation that we won't be how do we avoid becoming the older cranky generation who's just complaining about everybody's needs and isn't ready to move forward because those are the businesses that people leave.
Yeah. And that's why I think that you have the 60, 70, 80-year-olds who have been able to apply, what's current. And therefore, I think that even us, late 30s, 40s, I think even as we grow, as long as we're staying in tune with our people, whether that's just talking directly to your employees once a week or, having those advisors to help you figure out what's going on. I think that, naturally there's going to be that defensive, no, but we have to keep our ears open. And that way, even as we get older, we can still incorporate what, the current mainstream tactics for, at a workplace are.
Yeah. And I think you're saying, the more, if we can look at the younger people and see their strengths, then they're less protective against, don't tell me what to do. And then they're able to see the strengths of the older generation. So it's always comes back to that, appreciating, respecting each other for what you have to offer.
So, as a lot of your work is within the Jewish community, I'm sure you can appreciate certain cultural and familiar pressures to a given career type or path for many. Like many children of parents who struggled pressuring them to become a doctor. How do you help people navigate those relational pressures and desires to please their loved ones relative to a person's unique strengths?
Yeah, yeah. I love when I get the chance to do that. Usually it's more like 10 years later when, I became a lawyer because that's what my dad wanted. And now how do I get out of this? And so I see enough of that to be really comfortable when I see a young person about to make a really bad decision, to just show them examples of people who I am working with and, paint a picture for them of what that life is really like. I careful not to make decisions for people, but I try to give them the information that I think they don't realize. In many careers, I think people are just not aware what the work is really like. And, they think that lawyers is all about what you see in movies, right? And they think that, they only see the fun parts of people's days. You only see, the TV anchor, right? When they're on screen, you don't see all the hours of preparation beforehand. And so I try to give them that information. And that makes it a lot easier for them to go back to their parents and find a mutually beneficial, if they're someone from that kind of culture and family where their parents' opinion is very important. I find that if they come informed, then, their parents are very open to it. Parents really just want to know that you are going to be secure, something that you have like taken care of. Like I had a mother-daughter who the daughter was interested in being a writer, and the mother was like, "Come on, that's a joke. Nobody makes money from being a writer." And then I showed her somebody who, we both know, and I said, she makes $20,000 a month. Is that enough for you? And she was like, "What?" like, so, like, it's just a matter of having conversations. And I love when teens bring their parents into meetings, and then we can have this conversation together. And it's amazing to watch what happens when you just give the parents the information.
Yeah, that is cool. And it's nice that you provide that opportunity where parents can join in on the meeting.
Yeah, it's preferable because otherwise they're going to go home and have a fight about it. So
Yeah, it's similar to work, right? I know that often I like to have sometimes bigger meetings because that it's like broken telephone that I have to tell someone else what happened. It's nice to have all the stakeholders who actually are going to be a part of the decision should be in the same room and
exactly.
hash it out. So I don't like change, and I've really worked my whole life to get used to change and knowing that it's okay. But in general, it can be scary for a lot of people. And a lot of people have this aversion. So how should someone approach a big career or directional change if they know the change is necessary, but it's terrifying for them?
Yeah, it's really hard. People don't call me until they've been in pain for a while.
Mhm.
So I think that the scariest thing is to be like comfortably uncomfortable, because those people just live a passive life of unhappiness and don't really have anything pushing them. So I think that family is a big reason that people make a move. Their spouse has been badgering them, or their kids, or their parents. I'm working with a bunch of people now who they're watching their kids go and have career success, and they're like, "Why am I still in this dumb job for the last 25 years?" So it takes something to happen, and I don't usually get to be part of that process. By the time somebody books a call with me, they are so ready that there's not really a lot to work through.
So it seems like there's room for content and speaking about that. I mean, I'm not telling you what to talk about, but definitely there's room to let people know that it's okay and that you should think about it because we know that there are people who are stuck, but they're too scared.
Yeah, that's what I try to use my LinkedIn, networking for and posting, because I think that it's like, giving people little tidbits and hearing little things. And then eventually they say, I keep hearing this lady say this. Like, is that true? Are so many other people able to be happy and I'm just sitting here? So I think that's an easy way to bring awareness. And you're right, absolutely more can be done there.
Yeah, and but you definitely are doing a lot, so it's amazing. So it's time now for our lightning round. Shaina is a big reader, and so Shaina, we'd love to know your top three business or psychology books.
Yeah, I have so many. It's hard to pick only three. But a big one for me is The Choice, by Dr. Edith Eva Eger, I think is how you pronounce her name, or that's the right name. But to me, I think it's fascinating because as much as it's a Holocaust story, it's a personal life story. It's about her career. It's about her personal growth. And I think that it exemplifies like how personal growth and career growth, and everything else is really intertwined. So, the more a person, like, she had to navigate, her challenges and her relationships and her marriage and all of that to become who she was professionally. And so I know that's not the point of her book, but to me, there's a lot of lessons, and that's a big one. Seeing how you need to put those, you need to constantly be moving as a person to be moving in your career, and that's just going to go together. Another one is one that I mentioned, the Pathfinder. It was really life changing. I think it's rare that you pick up a book and then you can point to that book as, that reading this book completely changed my life trajectory. And so that's a big one for me. Not easy reading. It's more like a textbook, workbook. So I don't know that I would recommend it, but it's definitely, if you're confused, about your career, trying to figure out how does this thing work, and you want to sit down and read a book, that would be the one. And then I also mentioned Rami Sethi before, but he was one of the first people who I came across his website, and who was talking about money and how you don't need to, live the same way that your parents lived, and that, you can open a business, and he's talking about side hustles, and that definitely his book was one of the things that, sparked me being able to, confidently go out on my own and try something new.
Those are awesome recommendations, and we'll put the links to them below. So Shaina, as we wrap up, what are you currently working on? What's your next big project?
Well, I've been more recently in the last year, and sort of the coming year, a big goal is to train more coaches. I think there are a ton of life coaches. I don't know that there are a ton of career coaches who are trained to use aptitude testing to work with individuals. And, each coach can only work with so many clients. And so, I still take on clients, but I'm at a point where I want to train more people to be able to service their communities, specifically in different industries. And so that's a big project. I think that there are so many industries that you can focus on, and so many people from different backgrounds that, like, I work with the frum community, and there's such specifics that working with a coach outside of the community will just be so much more complex. And I think every community can use people like that.
So where can listeners learn more about you and your business?
Thank you. It's just ShainaKeren.com, ShainaKeren. That is the last name. Get in touch, schedule a call, learn more about me, or LinkedIn. Feel free to send a message, connect. I'd love to hear from people. I try to reply to every message.
Super. Well, Shaina, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for spending time today to share all your wonderful insights. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into the Digital Marketing Mentor. We'll speak with you next time. Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.